Hey everybody, it's Richard Harris minus Scott Leese today on the Surf and Sales podcast. He had to step out at the last minute, but we are super excited. And by we, I mean me and myself are super excited to have Amy Hrehovcik.
Well, you're not the only one that's excited, Richard. I'm excited too. And that was very good. Like that was, I mean, at least a 6.5, seven even.
And that was me practicing with you.
Yeah. I had to like say, Richard, like I let go of having my name pronounced well, like in second grade. So, please don't stress on my account.
No worries, no worries. And she is the host of the Revenue Reel podcast, which is coming out soon.
Well, it's supposed to be today. It will be today. But sadly, all-nighters, they worked better in college.
What's that?
I said all-nighters worked better in college.
Yeah,
Today,
tell
I'm
us
just
about
like,
this all-nighter. Like, who's still pulling all-nighters?
you know what? I have no excuse. I have no excuse. I already told you about the dark rabbit hole with the music and the LA friend and trailers and
Yep.
yeah, I didn't have any willpower. It was a terrible thing. And you make your choices and then you carry on with your day.
So we've known each other a while now. We've spoken on several offline conversations about sales and life and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah,
just sort of backtracking from even the podcast for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
When did you realize you liked sales? When did you realize you liked chasing the revenue?
Well, I was raised by a salesperson in New Jersey, and so there's that. But my dad had since pivoted. He's got a brokerage, right? And it was that way since I was in at least like a freshman in high school. And so I grew up around my dad putting together like the most incredible like training and empowerment programs for sellers. I, of course, wasn't going to do what my dad did and had a whole, oh, this is my dog.
That's all right.
I wasn't we'll talk about who has who trained later, Richard. But anyway, I was going to be in politics. I was going to be either a lobbyist or a campaign manager. And I won a competition in high school for Model Congress. And I was both fortunate and privileged to have access to that competition, but I also was that competitive and I won Speaker of the House. Went to school in DC. And so, everything was on track. And my first job out of school was a gubernatorial race in New Jersey. And like, oh my gosh, now she's going to want to go outside. Hold on. She'll have to wait. Lola, you have to wait, love bug. I'm sorry. I know it's hard. But we'll all hear her whining just so, because we've got a really fancy microphone here. So, maybe I'll mute it a little bit. But anyway, so I had worked on actually 15 campaigns. I was on the community organizing side before the gubernatorial race, but I was working in the primaries. It was the summer after graduating. And Richard, our guy, lost in the primaries. And I'll never forget the feeling like everybody on the campaign, everyone, like, so what happens in politics all the time is just as one candidate's, operation shut down, the other dude's like doubles in size, same ticket. And so I remember the feelings of watching like all my peers just gather their things, put them into boxes all at the same time and literally pick up their boxes and go to the other candidate. And I remember, maybe I was just like young or idealistic in this moment, but I just could not fathom this idea, like how, like we've been working and you get invested in like the platform and the candidate and like, not that guy, he's the not the enemy, but like this is our target. And to just like drop that in an instant and switch sides. I knew in that moment that I couldn't do it. I didn't want to live that way. And so that was a hard moment. However, I was very intentional with my pivot into sales, and it's a little bit deeper. And there's like good stories here about how I sought out at the time the best sales training program in the country, did a lot of research, and it was ADP. And so ADP, they have three divisions. I still do, right? So national accounts, major accounts, small business services. small business services is where like all the kids go and you're knocking on doors, right? Replacing payroll. And I didn't want to do that. And so I started stalking out national accounts and major accounts. National laughed at me, obviously, but major gave me a college try, which was good. It was excellent. So I started selling tech, hardware and software, biometric hand scanners at 24, and youngest person on the floor by a lot, only woman, and never left. So I did the IC thing for about 10
What
years.
appealed to you about it? Like what, aside from the fact your dad was there, right? You could have gone in a lot of directions coming out of politics. Was it because you know this industry a little bit more? To your point, you were exposed to it. Like what even drew you to sales?
If you were like being exposed to it means you avoid it. Like, let's be serious about that. Well, it was a conversation that I had with my dad. Hold on, I gotta let her out. She's gonna keep doing this. Sorry, audience. Hold on 1 second. Come on. Okay. So I had a conversation with my dad. Like it was one of those like heart to hearts. And my dad said that there's two types of workers out there. There are work processors and work producers. Work processors, they take a pile of papers or something and move it from point A to point B. This could be as high level as like a financial analyst who is receiving a bunch of numbers on Monday or at the beginning of the month and doing reports and what have you, presenting back. Same thing with an order at McDonald's, right? You're processing the customer through the order process to get the food and then on their way. And then my dad said that the other type of worker out there is a work producer. And work producers know how to create something from nothing. And if you choose this, and when you develop these skills, not only will you make like at least 5 times the money, but those skills will transfer into everything that you do moving forward. And that was it. That was it.
That was it. That's good. And he's right. He's 100% right.
So Richard,
how long did it take you how long did you go, okay, Dad, you're right?
like last month, does that count?
Yeah.
And you know what? If we're being frank, one ADHD person to another, like it varies by the hour.
Totally. So, by the way, so what is your dog's name?
Lola.
Which means we have two things in common.
You're kidding.
We have a dog named Lola.
You're kidding. What kind of dog? What kind of?
Cavapoo.
Richard, you're kidding me. That is what Lola is. Get out of town. Are you messing with me right now? Please tell me.
Hilarious. So that's the first thing. The other is the Model Congress, right? I did the Model Congress and the Model UN and all those things back in high school. So I appreciate where you went there. Although I never wanted to go into politics. I just
can I ask you a question? So what was when you were competing, they have different styles. Like, were you in a school that allowed you to go 4 years in a row, or was it just for seniors or an after school program?
It was, I think it was juniors and seniors for us.
Okay.
So,
yeah, same.
But it was fun. It was a good time. So talk to us. So you went into ADP, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long were you there?
I was not there that long. I was there for about like a year and a half, but I remember my big win there, and it's very connected to why I'm so particular about the way that the business of sales frames, I don't know, lead gen, opportunity sourcing, what have you.
Right.
And so the big one, do you mind if I share the big one from?
Go for it. Everybody wants to hear the big sale.
Okay, well, it wasn't a big sale. It was even better than that. I started thinking that, so we were selling again time entry systems before the cloud, right? Software, and then the biometric hand scanners. It was like, and mind you, everybody, I started navigating to my sales calls with MapQuest printouts and still recalled the joy with the TomTom on the dashboard. But anyway, so I had this idea that, I wonder which like government entity is responsible for time and labor violations of companies. And then I went and found out, and then I was like, I wonder if I submit a list for all the companies that got hit in my territory the year prior for time and labor violations. They got fined. And so I did. And 2 weeks, or it was like a long time. It was like 2 months later. It was like one of those old school, like rolled papers with a wax paper. And I got a list of like 200 some odd companies in my territory that got fined the year prior. And so created like a whole marketing campaign that did not disclose to them that I knew of their unfortunate circumstances the year prior, because, who wants to start a
Public.
relationship off like that? And yeah, that was I don't even share what percentage of that list converted, because you could see the tears like well
Right.
up in people's eyes.
So, so you went from there, and so it was a government deal, right?
No, I submitted to a government agency for a list, so FOIA,
Oh, for
Freedom
a
of
list.
Information
I
Act,
got, okay, got it.
public records.
So you did your research. Okay, that's
No,
super.
well, yeah. So
So,
okay, what were you gonna say?
so anyway, I was going to pull you out of this and go to the next topic, but if there was something else you wanted to add, I don't want to.
No, please, by all means, lead away.
So, so you went from ADP, then you went to Citibank, and then you went to Thomson Reuters.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So your experience in sales was ridiculously good, big company, right? At least
Until,
on
yeah.
paper, right, on logo, right? So how did
Well,
you?
you have to look after that, since
I
then
go
it was, we'll get there. Okay.
slow down.
Okay.
So how do you feel like the training was in each of those places? Like what were the highlights? If I said to you, what were the three things you loved about how they trained salespeople, or three things I learned at Thomson Reuters, what do you think that would be?
So ADP was easy, right? But I like sought them out and stalked them. Like they're just put that, like that was not, there was nothing accidental. My favorite part about that was we were assigned a mentor really for like the greater part of a year. And Henry Niemczek was the guy, and he actually just reached out to me like 2 weeks ago. It was like the happiest day in a long time. Anyway, so like just the sheer joy. But at Thomson Reuters, it was an exceptional place because, oh my gosh, like I don't even know how to describe it. I was surrounded by masterful sellers and account managers, and the buyers, the clients, like were so smart. Like
What made them masters? What do you think those things were, aside from years of experience and those kinds of things? Like what are the things you've learned?
Richard, my final, like my last 3 years there, it was 150% of plan, 200% of plan, 300% of plan. In my final year, I hit 100 in like February. So Jed Quattro, who is currently the VP at Adirant, which is a big, I forget, it's like a financial law firm system. Anyway, Adirant was actually a Vista Equity Partners Group. Like, what's the big one?
Come back to the question.
Whatever.
I'm gonna keep
So
you-
Jed was the master, and he was the main. So I was in an adjacent business unit next to Westlaw, and to say that we started off as like a red-headed stepchild, that wouldn't be a strong enough description of what we're like. Court Express, like sending runners to courts, where that landed. But I was brought in by the director, and so court runners, right? Physically, a law firm needs papers from the court. And so in New York City, though, these are the big firms that are sending like helicopters across the city to like move a carton of boxes. And so the challenge, though, with our business unit is that the year prior, or maybe like 2 or 3 years prior, New York's e-filing system became mandatory, which means every court case that was filed no longer needed runners. And so to say that we were hemorrhaging revenue would have like, yeah. Anyway, William Barth found me, Richard, on Craigslist, actually. And it was the weirdest, strangest thing. And like,
Amy,
yeah,
what did he teach you? Like you're winding
I'm
up.
sharing that I'm about to say. So William Barth taught me how to just get it done. He had he had tried to hire 2 people through the Westlaw like recruiting channels. And anyway, so to say like a director on Thomson Reuters was going to Craigslist, like that was the type of man he was. And he taught me about speed, status, and experience. And specifically with status, so those were the three, like that was the tagline at the beginning. And status, like bad news does not get better with time. And I learned how to lean into communicating bad news in a way that really differentiated me. The second part was when we finished that first year at 1,000% of plan, I begged him to take over the all the electronic court data for all of Thomson Reuters, and he agreed. And so over the course of the next like 2.5, 3 years, we spun out like 8 data products with flawless execution. So 100% success, which is exceptionally difficult to do in legal, because anytime you're selling something that is like an efficiency gain or what have you, you're up against the business model, right? So take as long as humanly possible to do everything. Anyway, so that was cool, right? Rolling out lots of products in a short period of time with like a massive budget. I miss that unlimited Amex card. The other thing that he taught me, or that the experience taught me, was what it felt like to play on a professional basketball team. And what I mean by that is when I look at some of the average win rates of sales floors right now, and it's like, I mean, I know we have, you know, which company I'm talking about, so I'm not going to say it, but the the idea when I look at like a team win rate that's under 20% for inbound leads, just to take one example, that like legit means you're setting the team up to lose, right? 80% of the time. And so when I talk with sellers and coach sellers about how to make smart decisions about where to go, I encourage them to ask about the collective win rate, because it gives some context into, you know, what level of selling, what team you're on, right? There's a big difference between
So
JV
that's
basketball.
your interview advice, is like, be sure to ask about the collective win rate. Is as an interview question, or just as you're coaching them to progress their own career, and as you moved on to enablement, like where are you suggesting
Well,
that?
both. It never stops. But in this instance, we're talking about playing on a team of people that are also professional basketball players, right? And so I mean, I say this all the time, and sadly, I have to, because the filter bubble in in Silicon Valley land is fierce. It's absolutely fierce. And so, in many ways, it's the bar is very low in this instance. And so, I have to remind people that, you know, if you are aspiring to be one of the greats and to do that quickly, or you know, as quickly as possible, then doesn't it make sense? Or, you know, which team do you think you'd have a better chance of becoming a pro on? You know, a JV basketball team, or, you know, a D1 college program. So
Yeah, this is great. Like
that's
I love that, right? Like I love the things that you've said so far, which are, I just want to, reiterate them for people, is like understanding speed, status, and experience. I love this quote of bad news does not get better with time, so lean in. Uh,
William Barth, baby. That's all
right.
William Barth.
And then always question the internal win rate. Is that how you phrase it? The internal.
Not question, just be aware of, and be aware that there's, you know, a big, beautiful world out there with lots of pro basketball teams. Not
Yeah.
all of them are, you know,
So yeah, not all Golden State
TV.
Warriors. Right. No, I get it. So you moved from big company, right? Like, so you learned these amazing things. You learned what I call the polish, right? Like I never went to big company, right? And so I think you got mentored in the right ways. I could probably go back and ask, like, how amazing was it to have a mentor your first year at ADP? Like
It was
that's
incredible.
life changing.
It's funny though that you said polished, because the two, so I was like a novelty at that point. I was like a kid, and like this, you know, like they had this, it was a tough interview process, but I don't think I've ever been prouder of a talk that I gave to win that job. But anyway, there were two guys, the top two guys in the office were vying for the position of mentor. And everyone was kind of pushing me towards this dude, Chris, who, and I don't remember his last name. Sorry, Chris, if you ever randomly hear this. But he had the polished vibe, right? That was, and then I like Henry, and I looked at the numbers, and Henry was like, you know, light years ahead of everybody. But Henry was a fucking hustler. Are we allowed to curse on here?
Oh, dude, whatever the fuck you want to say.
Henry was a hustler, and it was fun. I chuckle now looking back on that time, because you would think that someone would go for the polish, but I went for the, come in early. And I learned about time blocks, and I learned how to, what time to be on the sales floor so that nobody would talk to you or bother you, so that you could get your work done. And, it just,
They taught you a good process. They taught you how to understand a process and build a good process and why that process matters, it seems like.
well, that came from my dad. The fundamentals, the foundations, the building blocks, that was, uh, it's something that it's one of my favorite things to break down. In one of the podcast episodes, it's called Day Cracks the Talent Code. And we go deep into, as a new SDR, like the process of learning and teaching the fundamentals. And, for him, he got called a prodigy when he was on Five on Friday. Francois was very excited with him. But anyway, so that was dad. I wouldn't say that I don't know, maybe I just was there already.
Yeah.
But you know what, Richard, like, honestly, and I think a lot of people that have done well in this profession would agree that there is so much like self-learning that's a part of it. Like, there is no, and the person that wants it, like, that nothing's going to stop them. And I remember, like, I love music. We were just talking about this. I gave up music for a year in my car to listen to exclusively books on CDs.
Right.
And for a year, could you imagine just like the Maxwells and the Zig Ziglars? And I mean,
Yep. I love that. What would you give up for a year to be better at your career? That's a great question. It's a great thought. So I totally forgot to do this, but I need to thank our sponsors real quick for Salesforce, Sales Cloud, for joining us. We've switched from Revenue Cloud to Sales Cloud, which we greatly appreciate. Gong.io and Lead 411. And by the way, if you're not doing conversational analysis or analysts or whatever the catchphrase is, you're totally missing it with Gong.
Is there anybody not using like conversation?
Yes. Believe me, Gong wants there to be tons, because that means revenue growth, right? So you don't want them all to be done yet. So, but I want to move over to, your career. I'm sort of looking over your stuff. So you eventually moved into enablement, right? You went from.
Well, you're skipping over Chief of Customer Value at Viewable that was acquired, then moving to San Francisco and doing tons of go-to-market.
I want to get into the enablement piece.
Okay. So cool things, right? Did cool things. And then, was like, okay, now what am I going to do?
So what made you want to go from, for lack of a better phrase, carrying the bag to moving into an enablement piece, right? Because it's not all great sales reps are great teachers, right? Like, we know this. So
yeah, we know this after we promote them.
Right. Well, now we know it before we promote them.
But well, who's now? Like, how do you know? What kind of information you got going over there, Richard? What do you know?
Well, now you just know how to interview for it, right? Them sitting in on a couple of interviews and maybe helping the first week does not mean they're good managers.
But I did write pretty extensively about this one last. I wasn't shy in there either. It's really deep.
Look, we all know it. Everybody who's in sales leadership knows it, and even sales reps know it too.
Oh yeah, they do. Oh yeah.
But talk to me, like, what drew you to enablement, right? Like, I know, again, you were exposed to it with your dad.
Well, no, I wasn't. He was a broker. He was an owner of a business. He was a sales manager. I had no idea about enablement. He just is someone that knows how to coach both individuals and teams, and really focused on, development, player development, and which ironic.
What drew you to enablement?
I didn't want to be a sales manager. I knew for a very long time that I didn't want to be a sales manager. And that's a really hard thing to come to terms with, because what do you do? What do you do with like 10 years?
So let's pause there. So and this is great, because I think a lot of people don't see the difference, or they think there's too much overlap. Or they think they have to be a sales manager. What were the things?
No, they do, because that's the only career option we're affording in most places. And it's like, this is why I'm so focused on creating adjacent career paths.
Hold on. So what, I love working with you, because I can just tell you to be quiet.
It's only because you have ADHD and because we have history, Richard.
Yes. Oh no, believe me, there's plenty of people I've interviewed where I have no history and I still do the same, but it's more fun with you. So it's not as abrupt. But what are the things about sales management that you, before as you were making that decision to say, you know what, I don't like this, I didn't want to do that. And I'm asking in the context for those who are listening, for them to go, oh, I hadn't thought about that part. Maybe I do need to see if I like that part. Because some people might like it, some people might not. But what were those things for you?
Hindsight being what it was, I think that I don't know. I can't even say it out loud. I had one great sales manager that at Thomson Reuters, her name was Lisa Barrett, and she was actually like, there was some politics playing, and then the dude that whatever became my manager, so I was not a fan. Anyway, there's that, but also I Richard, I prefer to work with top perform I don't know, like, I didn't like I don't have a I'm not a very nurturing person. I know that, like, the whole idea of, like, gender and biology shit, like, is not real because I'm not a nurturing person by nature, and there was that. Also, there's a lot of you're in a if you're lucky, right, you're in a weekly with your manager, um, and so that's a lot of repetition, and experiences with a certain whatever. I I sold differently in that I was very focused on um like Pareto's principle. I was constantly sourcing for like what are my 20% activities that are going to get me 80% of my results. And because of that, um yeah, I had a very different style of when to start opportunities and when to like how to do touch points and how to like multi-thread through the organization before there were words for it. And I wish like right after Thompson, I actually made a beeline for process improvement training. And it wasn't until then that I realized that, I had like tested out of math in college, remedial writing for a year, but like I hadn't taken a math class since 18. And I'd been doing the math in my head, which meant that I didn't have the words to explain the decisions that I was making,
Right.
and so there was that. Um, and then, yeah, it was just like deep and guttural. Like I just did not want to be the stereotypical manager riding
Did you
people.
did
Yeah.
you did you not want other people to be in control of your compensation that much?
No, but like that's ridiculous. No, of course not. What I just described to you were the reasons. And I think a better answer or question would be, since we're driving here, how did I succeed with the pivot, or like how did I get to that
Well, we're
point?
getting
Because it
there,
was
but I want
hard.
to understand this part first, right? So the things that I heard were, one, you
Richard,
recognize.
most managers aren't very good. Most of us have terrible experiences with our managers. It is not a secret. It's not like, and so, yeah, is that really that awful to, or that like hard? Like that's what,
You're also very self-aware, right? And like for the fact that, because this is where, again, I think you and I are like, I can't do politics. I can't stand it. Like I don't have the patience for it. I'm too impatient to play that game of politics. And then the other part that I heard you say was, you sort of recognize you're not necessarily the most nurturing person in terms of management, which,
okay. So I've managed people. That's a different
sure,
thing with sales enablement. Like
it's different in sales enablement than a sales manager.
you're right. But again, most sales managers are the opposite of nurturing.
But
Most
I
sales
think good ones
managers,
are. But I
what'd
think,
you say?
but to your point, you recognize that that's what a good sales manager was, and you're like, that's not me. Like you were in.
No, I recognize that the ones that I had were this sounds terrible, not my dad, right? Obviously. And so it was a hard bar to set. But at the same time, like I was instructed on the fundamentals of selling and like I understood the science and the art. And like I did when I was at City, I put together a talk on how to teach kids about money and started marketing it to moms groups. Like
Right.
I didn't have children. I can't even believe they listened to me, but I just knew how to find and look for target rich environments like the FOIA. And so I had never experienced, right, anything like the fundamentals that I was afforded when learning this profession. And yeah, and so it was just a very high bar, but I wouldn't change anything
Yeah,
about it.
how do you view then the difference between sales management and the skill it takes there, and then I don't know if it was
Which one of the
management,
skills? Because if
enablement.
we, well, so if we look at the Project Oxygen, this was Google's, they did that big study and it was 2 phases. First one was the 8 characteristics, and then they added 2 more. Psychological safety was a new one. Out of the 8, one of the lowest ranking characteristics of great managers was technical acumen, which means you promote someone that knows how to do the job. And that, out of all the factors on in Project Oxygen that were uncovered, was a very low ranking one. And so when I look at the way that we promote sales managers, that tends to be it. And then there's no investment made to, like, here, go to this coaching and training program, like learn how to coach individuals and a team. And then there's tons of factors, right? It's the incessant chasing after unicorns, right? We just gotta, $20 million. We need 10 managers. You did good that quarter, right? Come on. But at the same time, we could look at the gender shit that plays out, and still to this day, 85% of the managers and leaders in the tech sales space are mostly white men. And you could take that even further up to the VCs, right? 97% of venture capital last year was mostly white men. So, like, yeah, it's a whole different experience for someone who is not a white man, especially in tech. That's worth considering. And then, yeah, and I don't mean to disparage. Like, I understand that.
There's no disparagement. Like there's like
Well,
I
so
don't.
here's the thing, Richard. This is the what you're feeling, right? There is so much research right now on where productivity and performance comes from, right? And when I like autonomy, right, is a big part of it, as is happiness. And like you've got to be trying hard not to look at the research or be aware. And anyway, then I look at the way that we treat SDRs, and not only are we giving them the hardest part of this job, but we are managing what they do down to the day and task. Like, aside from the moral implications of what that does to someone's soul, um, it's like a terrible business decision, in that, like, if you want productivity, if you want performance, and you
Well, how do
want
you do it
to,
to change
what
it?
to say?
So to those SDR leaders who are listening, right? And it's like, okay, what are the things that I can, and I'm like this, I'm a task manager, right? And I think a lot of sales people are task managers. Like you do the things, you do the fundamentals, you get to the revenue, right?
I disagree with
The
that
autonomy.
wholeheartedly, but okay. I was an artist, but I learned the fundamentals, which is a requirement to then be able to create art.
So how do you do that in the SDR world? How do you give them the right skills, tools, fundamentals, and then also, to your point, give them the right level of autonomy? Like, what are the things they should have more autonomy around?
Well, it's so funny that you said this, because I've got a full episode on Day Kong cracks the talent code as an SDR. I go into it on 5 on Friday. I was fortunate enough to be a guest on the day. It was like tips for a new SDR just starting out. And so between those 2 podcasts, or those 2 places where your audience can go listen, um, to the way that I explain the learning process for new sellers, and kind of challenge them, like Niles DeVoe was the name of the young Black woman that was just getting started on 5 on Friday, and she was fantastic. I mean, whip smart. And
Yeah, but give people, so Amy,
okay,
come back to answer the question. What are
I
the
did
things a manager can do better to give people their autonomy?
they can go listen to one of those 2 things or watch, because it depends. There's so much context and
But
complexity
give them
that's
something that, like, I'm okay with you promoting your own podcast. I get it, but there's got to be a nugget or two you can give that doesn't give away the whole podcast.
okay. The human brain sees a problem and jumps to a solution in like a fucking nanosecond, right? Nanosecond. And so when we see something that's wrong or whatever, we see it and then we know exactly what needs to be done to fix it. And are we going to ask anybody that's actually experiencing the problem, like, hey, SDRs, what do you think? No, but we're just going to put it in. And by the way, that solution is probably very, very likely to be a text purchase, because that's far easier than dealing with a process or a people challenge. Anyway, that lack of due diligence to suss out the real problem has us all chasing after symptoms indefinitely. And the challenge with chasing symptoms is that you feel very busy. And then it's like so perplexing why we're not actually moving the needle. And so that would be the first thing that I would encourage your listeners to do, is really, pretend like you've got a blank sheet of paper and start to ask questions of yourself and of your organization. Like, okay, this is how we set it up. Like, why did we have it set up this way? How did it come to be these ways? And I think the second part to that is like, like experience is a tricky thing, especially when we have wins in the past, because it tends to bias us. And in fact, frankly, who we learn most from our mistakes. But I say that because, like when I have conversations about lead sourcing or lead gen, right? Like you heard about the moms groups, you heard about the FOIA requests, like I'm in a different stratosphere of what's possible than 99% of the humans that I interact with in tech sales, especially in on teams that have an SDR model. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I think that there are instances when that model works well, depending on, a bunch of different things, like the business model and the go-to-market strategy and, whatever, a bunch of other things. That said, more often than not, I think we try to take that role in that function and like shove it into like a square peg, when, because Salesforce is doing it, or Ryan Walsh, who's like so cool and very, very special. And I'm being dead serious. Hi, Ryan. He was one of the first to create an SDR function at Channel Director in the early 2000s. But that said, we've come so far from that it's like become just illogical, really, at this point. And so that would be the two things. Is one, to really like just start to ask more questions about the status quo. Let go of the experiences that you've personally had that with this model probably that worked for you, and that makes it extra difficult to let go of, because those emotions are tied to it. But shit changes. That's the only guarantee, and shit changes fast. So being able to remain curious and open and listen to your people, go ask questions, like find out what's going on. Hell, I love looking at the handoff process between the SDRs and the AEs, and I realized that we're having like I see red, Richard, when I realize that the clients are having identical conversations on both sides, because for like whatever. And so not only is the friction felt right on the sales floor between the teams, right, and we've seen it all play out in a bunch of different ways. You got the annoying shit of having leads push back down onto SDRs, which means that, and I really don't like hearing that, because that means they don't have control over their income, and what the fuck. And then, the lion's share of the brunt of the friction and like the duplicitous nature, or, one of the 8 forms of waste, rework, is borne by the clients. And it's so insane to me, because like when you study process improvement, there are principles, right? And the first principle of process design and process improvement is that value flows at the pull of the client. And sales processes and lead processes, these are processes that are subject to the first principles of process. And yeah, anyway, was that good enough for you?
I'm going to ask you one last question
Sure.
in a minute. But I obviously got to give our shout out to Salesforce, Sales Cloud, and Gong.io and 411. Thank you for sponsoring us, and Amy, thanks for being here. Here's our, we always end our show with this question, which is,
Well, I do know the question. Yay, thank you, sponsors. I just want to say thank you for sponsoring my episode with my friend Richard.
what can we do for you? What question would you like to ask now that you're a podcaster, right? Ask the question. Where can we be of help, support, whatever it is?
So this is like insider information. How long do you guys, I know you don't do a lot of, you do fast and full of flaws, which is like, I stole Scott's motto. That's like, even though I stayed up all night
Everybody
listening to
steals
music.
that shit.
I know it's so good though, but I relapse often. My perfectionist ways, it's like, it's like pulling me back. Anyway, so I'm doing a hotline, like Dr. Drew, Adam Carolla style.
Mhm.
And it is, so that would be, you asked about what would be helpful. And so that would be the biggest thing. My why is, of course, the ICs, the individual contributors, the front lines, period, end of story. And the podcast is called Revenue Reel, and it's a series of uncomfortable conversations in sales. And whether this means buyers or bosses or
Right.
peers or family members, anyway. So the hotline is going to be a live call-in aspect, and it's going to be a segment on the show. And so that would be the big thing that I would ask for help, is just getting the word out.
That's cool. So you're going to go live on LinkedIn about it, or you're just going to post?
No. Yeah. So these are the things that I'm going through. I was totally happy with a Google Voice and a voicemail. I had all the transcripts set up. I paid the extra $10 a month. I tested. And then I can't remember who it was. It was either Colin Mitchell or like Jeff Bajork. One of them was just like, it was probably Colin. This sounds like a Colin thing. So now I'm trying to figure out like the logistics to make it happen. But I found the right platform, I believe, which is called, I always want to say Rainmaker FM, but it's not that. It's something with an FM. Now, I did record one in here. However, my audio levels were like terrible, and I actually had to record it again. So hopefully I'll have better luck next time. But anyway, it's going to be, the software that I went with, I'm able to create like guest links. And since I'm going to be, manning the hotline with a different guest every week, it's going to be based on a certain period, right? In the same way that we were booked for a while or whatever. So I will, make sure that the callers know what time we're going to be going live and be ready in the queue.
Cool.
And I would expect at least a solid month of iterations before, like I myself would get in that queue, just to like put it out there. But who doesn't want to be a beta, Richard?
Anytime. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy, for being here. For those who, if you don't remember, it is Revenue Reel, right?
Yeah. Conversations about uncomfortable conversations happening in sales.
Amy, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And as always, great to catch up with you.
A pleasure. Tell Lola I said goodbye, Richard.
I will.
Bye.
Bye.